All right, guys, we have three things I want to talk about today. These are going to be the Battle of Antietam, the Battle of Gettysburg, and the Battle of Vicksburg. Now, these three are the three biggest kind of turning point, most impactful, like in both a social and political and war context to the Civil War. These are the three ones that stick out in my mind as kind of the essential things you must learn about the Civil War. Now, this is not to say that there's not tons of other battles, because there is. There's Prairie Grove, there's Pea Ridge, there's the Red River Campaign, there's the Battle of Camden, there's Bull Run 2, there's the Battle of Shiloh. There's all kinds of them going on all over the place, but these three are the essential three. I want to wrap this up in a bow as quickly and as neatly as I can. I know I spent 27 minutes yakking at you guys last week. This week I'm going to try to do it in under 15. All right, so this video might not be as pretty. It might not have as many pictures and other stuff in it, but I'm going to talk. I'm going to try to overlay pictures afterwards, and we're going to knock this sucker out. So, lo and behold, let's start with the battle that I touched on a little bit last week. That is going to be the Battle of Antietam. This takes place on September 17th, 1862, between George McClellan and Robert E. Lee. Now, if you don't remember, George McClellan heavily outnumbered Robert E. Lee at the tune of 87,000 to about 38,000 troops. This battle takes place outside of Sharpsburg, Maryland, near Antietam Creek, and it is a tactical draw. No side actually wins this battle, but it is significant in the fact that this is the first one that's really photographed and pushed out to the public. People can see what's going on in this war, and not only that, it is the single bloodiest day in U.S. military history. Have about 22,000 total casualties. That is killed in action, wounded in action, missing in action, and they're all Americans. They're all gone, or hurt, or some version or nature of that. Now, this battle is going to have a kind of a significant swing in a few different ways, because one, this is the first battle that takes place on Union soil. Everything up until this point in the war has been in the South and on Confederate territory. General Robert E. Lee begins his march up through the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, which is kind of like a gateway to the north. This lovely little valley and mountains. It's kind of a gateway to the north. He's marching up there, trying to get to the north to kind of expand his military campaign. I'll get a little bit more of that into with Gettysburg. But he meets McClellan, and they fight to a tactical draw. Nobody really wins the day, but Lee is forced to retreat, and this is where one of those first big changes is going to come, because McClellan is going to be fired. Because not only does he not successfully win a battle where he has 3 times the numbers, he fails to chase Lee's army in their retreat and fails to follow them and completely put it out for good. He follows them. This war is over way sooner than it is in 1865, but he doesn't, and this kind of is a head scratcher for Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham Lincoln is going to fire McClellan. He's going to be gone. Bye-bye. This is going to usher in Grant as the leader of the Union Army and lead to a whole different ball game in terms of military tactics between the two sides. Now, not only is this significant because of that change in leadership and it being the bloodiest day in American history, it leads to one of the most important speeches Abraham Lincoln ever gives, and one of the most important documents ever written and put forth in our country or in the world in general. It's going to cause Lincoln, 5 days after the end of the battle on September 22nd, 1862, to give the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, in simple terms, this is the speech, the document that frees the slaves. It's the easiest way to think about it. It's not exactly what it was, but in terms of its greater impact, this is that freeing moment. This leads to the 13th Amendment, which actually frees all the slaves. But the Emancipation Proclamation, in reality, it's a warning. He issues this proclamation basically saying, those states in rebellion, so the ones that left the Union that are in the South, if you do not return to the Union effective January 1st, 1863, all of your slaves are free. Now, this is it's kind of hard to picture, because you have technically the President of the United States or the North in the Union issuing a law to a bunch of states that said they're no longer part of the United States, so he should have no right to do that, but he does it anyway. And basically what he's saying is if a slave makes it to the north after they escape, they're free. Or if a slave makes it to a territory or place in the south that is occupied by the federal army or the Union, they're free. That's all they got to do is get there, and then it's free, and they're done, and they're not going to return them, and there's no fugitive slave law, and that's all gone. And of course, this kind of aligns with President Lincoln's platform from before the war, where he says, I don't want to mess with your slavery. And this is even built into this. He's giving them several months worth of time to come back to the Union, and then he doesn't mess with their slavery. But if they don't, that's the ultimatum that their slavery will be freed. He is that dedicated to the war effort that he knows he's going to win. All right, Antietam. Now we're going to jump forward into the next year, and we're going to talk about the two major turning points of the war. First one I want to talk about is the probably most famous battle of the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg. Battle of Gettysburg is fought in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, over July 1st through 3rd, 1863. This is going to be fought between Major General George Meade with the Army of the Potomac. I think he's at about 104,000 at this time versus none other than Robert E. Lee. He's got 70 to 75,000. This battle is going to result in the largest number of casualties in the war period over those 3 days. I know in that one day at Antietam we had about 22,000, but in the 3 days at Gettysburg we're going to end up with around 50,000 killed, wounded, and missing. And this is going to kind of have an interesting effect because Antietam being the first battle on Union soil, pushing Lee back, Lee is going to make an advance into Northern Territory up through the Shenandoah Valley, reaching all the way up into Gettysburg into Pennsylvania. And his entire goal behind this is if he can ravage and cause chaos in the North, maybe he can get the Northern politicians to abandon their war effort and change what's going on. Be like, okay, now it's on our home front. We have to change, and that's his entire goal, is to get up there and kind of force this change. Now, Lee is going to march in, and on day one, he is going to be successful. He's going to kind of push back the Union lines and be victorious on day one. But moving into day 2 and day 3, Lee, the Union defensive under Meade, is going to actually hold and really kind of push back Lee and force him to abandon this northern conquest and this idea of terrorizing and causing a little bit of chaos in the North to get them to abandon their effort. Now, on this final third day, we're gonna have this thing called Pickett's Charge. Pickett's Charge is going to be on Cemetery Ridge. And there's going to be about 12,000, 13,000 Confederate infantrymen that are going to basically run a straight-up bull rush straight up the middle of Cemetery Ridge and try to attack the Union lines and break the Union lines in the center so they can spread it and kind of break the defensive formation and take the battle of the whole. They're going to be repelled heavily by artillery fire, big cannons, and rifle fire, and it's going to be an utter failure. And this failure at Gettysburg permanently pushes the Confederate Army out of the North and forces them back to the South. And then it has kind of this ripple effect on the rest of the war effort. A big part of war is morale. Do you believe in what you're fighting for? Do the people at home believe in what the boys and girls are fighting for? The people who are actually fighting the war. This happens a lot. Like if you look at the war effort during World War II, where the people in the United States ramped up industrial manufacturing to help support everybody overseas, it's the same thing. If your people at home, the people not actually firing the guns, if they don't support the war cause, then you can't really win. You have no you gotta have something to fight for, and you gotta have some belief to fight for it. And this is gonna go a long way in really breaking the spirit of the Southern population. Now they're going to, like, it's going to break their will, and they're going to start to really lose their morale towards this war. It's like, okay, he got broken out of here, and this is not working. What are we doing? We have to rethink our thing. I think what's going on. Another major kind of ripple to that is one historian, James McPherson. He actually speculates that the Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens was actually on his way to surrender, to start discussing terms of surrender for the war in 1863. And as he's going towards Washington, Lincoln hears of what's going on in Gettysburg, and Lincoln says, no, you not letting him through the lines, because he kind of sees this as this moment to really build this momentum. Say, okay, now we're going to take this. We're going full bore. We're going to break them, and we're going to win this war outright, and really force this surrender and force it hard. Not only this is the South was trying to gain aid from some European countries, and with the Battle of Gettysburg and them hearing about the results, the European countries, such as like Britain and France, and they decided not to send help to the South. The Americans in the Revolutionary War largely won the war because they got help from France. They got overseas help to help them fight the war. The South was kind of hoping for that same thing, but this really effectively ends any European interest in the war and says, okay, they're going to have to fight this on their own. We're not going to help them, and that really hurts the war cause. And then finally, with Gettysburg, several months later, when dedicating the cemetery at Gettysburg, Lincoln's going to give the Gettysburg Address, and it's, the speech, if you were here 7 years ago, and all that good stuff that Lincoln talks about. This speech really invigorates Northern morale. It's like, 50,000 Americans died here. We cannot stop until this is done. We cannot stop until this is won concisely, and he really brings a new spirit and level of confidence to this Union fight, to the Northern Army, that's honestly going to just crush the soul of the South. And it's going to lead forward, and this is like that major pivot point in the war where it's kind of been a stalemate. Lee's marching north, and they're kind of punching each other back and forth, and finally this is one of those first blows that's going to really put the South on their heels and change the entire direction on the war. And this ends on July 3rd of 1863, and then probably the other biggest turning point of the war is going to end the very next day on July 4th, 1863. This is going to be the Siege of Vicksburg. Now, the Siege of Vicksburg, it's long. Over almost 2 months long. It's from May 18th, 1863 to July 4th, 1863. This is going to be fought between Grant and the Army of Tennessee with about 77,000 troops, and Lieutenant General Pemberton, I do not remember what army he has. He's only got 33,000, and they're locked up in Vicksburg. Vicksburg is basically right on the southern border of Arkansas and Mississippi. It's really close. It's on the Mississippi River. Mississippi River is a big deal because it goes all the way up and down the country, and you can send troops and supplies and all kinds of things up and down the country to refuel your supply lines and do things like that. Now, Grant is going to try to have an assault on Vicksburg. It's going to fail and fail and fail, and Grant basically is like the only bad memories he has of those assaults is the fact that they didn't work. So what he does is he changes tactics. He goes completely medieval 12th, 13th century style warfare on them and basically surrounds the city, cuts off all the supplies, and starves them out until they surrender. Now, he's going to be successful of this on July 4th, 1863, and he's going to take Vicksburg, and what that does is it gives Union control of the entire Mississippi River. It cuts off the Confederacy from Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, so you can't supply any of those lines, and it shrinks the Confederacy down, and it completely disrupts their supply pattern, so they cannot supply their troops. They cannot get them fresh boots, fresh guns, ammo, artillery shells, nothing. You can't supply your troops. You can't really fight a war because you're fighting on rations. So that's going to be a major game changer and really give control over to the Union Army in this war, and they're going to continue to push south and push hard. This is going to lead to probably the one of my favorite things from the Civil War, which is General Tecumseh Sherman's march to the sea. He's going to basically take 60 miles wide, starting in Atlanta, and burn and destroy anything and everything on his way to the sea, to the ocean. And I'm talking, he doesn't care what it is. He's going to light it on fire. He's going to burn everything. It's total war. It's this new modern thing that's going to be used to this day. And he kind of like, if we destroy everything and we break their spirit, how can they fight us back? And he's going to chase the army down through Atlanta up into Charleston, up into South Carolina. And this is all going to push every kind of wedge the Southern Army up into Virginia around Appomattox. And then finally on April 9th of 1865, the South will surrender and the war will be over. All right. No, I went over 15 minutes, but I did it as quickly as I could. Yeah. Civil War in a nutshell. Civil War is over. In ushers the era of Reconstruction. And with that, this is the end of our final video lesson. Really wish I could have taught this in person. This is like my favorite stuff to teach. But you're with what the apples gave you. And yeah. The end.